Hello, good day, everyone. I hope everything is going well with you, and I welcome you back to our subject, Purposive Communication, using English in multilingual context. And I hope that you are in a comfortable seat wherever you are watching this pre-recorded video. And now let's proceed with our lesson for today. So we are done with our lesson 1, Communication in Globalization. And now let's proceed with our lesson 2, which is all about the local and global communication in multicultural settings. To proceed with our lesson 2, let's have first our learning outcomes. So our first learning outcome is to demonstrate an awareness of the reality of cultural diversity. Second is to demonstrate and to understand of how cultural diversity affects communication. And our last learning outcome is to appreciate the benefits and challenges of cross-cultural communication. Okay, let's start with intercultural communication. So what is intercultural communication? So intercultural communication, according to science, each person is genetically unique, except for identical twins. Each person has unique genetic composition. And this uniqueness becomes even more heightened because of individual experiences. Again, each person daw is genetically unique of individuals' experiences. Take note that. Next, humans are formed by forces other than genetics. The family background, religious affiliation, educational achievements, sociocultural forces, economic conditions, emotional states, and other factors that shape human identities. So it says that we human beings are formed by strength as an attribute of physical action or movement rather than genetics or genes. And because of this, no two people can ever be exactly the same. Bisan pagkambal mo, dili jud na mga aspect nga nakapalahi sa inyo duha. So kambal lang mo pero naa siya characteristics nga wala sa imo and napo siya characteristics nga wala sa imo. Like for example, na siya alom sa mata. So dapat nya ikaw wala. Oh, di ba? Mo na ang kuan, ti mailhan nga no two people can ever be exactly the same. So generic lang siguro kaugnaw. Minana lang na siya, ha? Again, no two people can ever be exactly the same. Next, this situation, the diversity of people and cultures impacts communication. And people interacting with those coming from unfamiliar cultures may have difficulties in communication. And most people tend to conclude that miscommunication results from a speaker's lack of proficiency in a language. So what is not realized is that the fact that even with excellent language skills, people may still experience miscommunication. And that's the reality. And that situation means even if you are excellent in speaking, there are times jud nga magkamali ka, and that's life. Accept it. Okay? Because not all effective speakers perfect jud sila ang pag-deliver sila ng mga messages. Okay? And here, nanabutay another article by Carol Kenzie Goman, year 2011. And ang iyahang title is Communicating Across Cultures. So communicating across culture means that you are communicating sa kabilang countries or sa kabilang cultures. Tagalog man lagi taron. Communicating across culture is challenging. Yes, of course. Okay, we have different cultures. We have mga lalahitag mga dialects nga gipanggamit or language, or even ang katatang gina-discuss nga speech community, di ba? Marag cultural shock ta kay lahi sila og language or dialect nga ginagamit. Okay? So communicating across culture is challenging, John. And each culture has set of rules that its member take for granted. And few of us are aware of our own cultural biases. Of course, nadyo tayo mga biases, no? Sa ato ang culture, even in our own culture, nadyo tayo biases into the other cultures. Because cultural imprinting is begun at a very early age. So sa first bullet, culture is unique, Jude, and has its own standard. So please lang don't take it for granted. And with this second bullet, of course, maka-experience kita og mga cultural biases. And if we say cultural bias or cultural biases, it is the interpreting or judging by standards to one's own culture. Mana siya ha? Ga-judge ka or gihatagan nimo og wrong interpretation ang kanang culture and your own culture. Next is the challenge for multinational communication has never been greater. And worldwide business organizations have discovered that intercultural communication is a subject of importance, not just because of increased globalization, but also their domestic workforce is growing more and more diverse, ethnically and culturally. So in short, intercultural communication is a massive, important, especially in the world of business. Okay? And if we say, asaman to ang domestic workforce. If we say domestic workforce, mo na siya ang mga local na trabaho. Okay? Next. We are all individuals. Lisod pod. And no two people belonging to the same culture are guaranteed to respond in exactly the same way. Kaya nata ginatawag nga speech community. Again, how we have different characteristics. If we say we have the same characteristics, yes, you have that characteristic that I have, but the question is, are all of my characteristics are there? Ana ba sa imuha? Di ba? Wala. So we have this different and unique characteristics, and you should be proud of it. Next, we have the high context and the low context. So all international communication is influenced by cultural differences. Even the choice of communication medium can have cultural overtones. The determining factor may not be the degree of industrialization, but rather whether the country fall into a high context or a low context culture. And if we say cultural overtones, mo na siya, it is the aesthetic product of a melody refers to a way culture perceive a melody. A melody here may suggest a different images or responses for a different listening areas. And if we say industrialization, I know nga naka-encounter na mo ani in your subject nga Philippine history, I think so. So industrialization, mo na siya, it refers to operate factories or kanang magtayo ng mga factories in business in city or country, even in region. Okay? So now let us know the differences between high and low context. So let's start with the high context culture. So these are the examples of high context culture: the Mediterranean, Slav, Central European, Latin America, Africa, Arab, Asian, and American Indian. So ang mga high context culture, they leave much of the message unspecified. So unspecified sila, mga marag wala jud siya na sa tawag wala siya na dili siya specific. To be understood through context and nonverbal cues and between the lines interpretation of what is actually said. So in short, ang high context culture are those that communicate in ways that are implicit or more pahiwatig or not expresses directly, and nag-rely lang sila heavily on context. And mga na ang mga high context culture. So ang mga example ani mao ni sila tanan. Okay? And now let's see kung unsa ang low context culture. So low context culture, mga example nato from mga Germanic and English speaking countries. So they will expect messages to be explicit and specific compare kang high context culture. So in short, si low context culture are those that communicate information in direct, explicit, and precise way. So in other words, muna siya ang direct to the point makipag-communicate. Okay? Next, we have sequential and synchronic. So let us know the differences between sequential and synchronic culture. So let's start with atas ang i-discuss ni siya as general. So some culture think of time sequentially as a linear commodity to spend, to save, or to waste. At ang tanawon later on kung kinsa ang ga-spend, ga-save, or ga-waste of time. Other cultures view time synchronically as a constant flow to be experienced in the moment, and as a force that cannot be contained or controlled. And now let's see kung kinsa ang ga-spend, ga-save, or ga-waste sa mga time and many aspects of culture. Let's start with the sequential culture. So, mo ni siya mga examples sa sequential culture. North America, English, German, Swedish, and Dutch. Business people give full attention to one agenda item after another. So, ang sequential culture, it sees time as one line consisting of equal building blocks. So, ano sila ang mga sequential culture. And if you say sequential, of course, muna siya ang sunod-sunod ng mga events or timeline. And mostly, sa ilahang expression sa sequential culture are as follows. Kanang, people do one thing at a time. Times are precise. Time is limited, and time is a resource that needs to be efficiently used. And mao na siya ang sequential culture. Next, we have this synchronic culture. So what is synchronic culture? South America ang example, Southern Europe and Asia. The flow of time is viewed as a sort of circle without an ending, with the past, present, and future all interrelated. This viewpoint influences how organizations in those cultures approach deadlines, strategic thinking, investment, developing talent from within, and the concept of long-term planning. So in synchronic culture, time is very flexible and various activities can place at the same time. Grabe maka-multitask. And also, they adjust time according to their needs. Oh, manina ha? And the expression of the synchronic culture in times are as follows. People do multiple things at a time. Time is a secondary task, and future is interconnected with the past and the present. And that's the differences between the synchronic and basta tong isa kalimot ko, synchronic and sequential culture. And now let's proceed with the affective versus neutral. Asa kaha mo ani? Affective ba mo or neutral? Ako na ako sa versus. So affective and neutral context describes how culture expresses their emotions. So affective, mo na siya ang readily showing emotion. Anang emotional nga pagkatao. Mo na siya. Murag ikaw ba? Charot. Neutral, do not telegraph their feelings but keep them carefully controlled and subdued. Mo na ang mga tao nga neutral lang jud sila nga nang ginatago nila ilang feelings kana bitaw. Mapagawas lang nila if napuno na jud sila. Pero ang affective ha kanang direct dayon sila i-show nila ang ilahang emotions. So this does not mean that people in neutral culture are cold or unfeeling, but in the course of normal business activities, neutral cultures are more careful to monitor the amount of emotion they display. So mo akong gigun kay na nga in business, so dapat open-minded jud ka kay not all the time nga imong business mo flourish. Okay? Dili tanan panahon nga mulambo jud. Na ay time nga walay customer, na po time nga daghay customer, and you should be aware of that. Be neutral. And emotional reaction were found to be less acceptable in Japan, Indonesia, the UK, Norway, and the Netherlands, and most accepted in Italy, France, the US, and the Singapore. So we have a synthesis here for our for this lesson. So the diversity of people and culture impacts communication. So lalahi man ta og culture, so maka-impact po na siya sa communication nato. Because communicating with people coming from unfamiliar cultures possesses challenges. Of course, daghan jud mga challenges nga may encounter when in interacting with different culture. Kay wa ta kabalo kung unsa ang ilahang speech community, and ma-culture shock na lang pud ta. Okay? And that is why challenging jud kaayo siya. And the success of intercultural communication does not depend on language skill alone, but on openness and sensitivity to cultural diversity, as well as on a genuine desire to understand and to be understood. Okay? So, di ba, pag mayroon tayo diversity, muna siya ang kaibahan of people and different cultures impacts communication. So, we should be careful, Jud, sa ato ang mga body language, mga sign language, sa ato mga expression, kung maato ta sa mga different cultures or different community. Because muna akong gingon ka in our sa ato mga na-discuss nga, it's good for you, pero bad na sila ha nga interpretation. And you should be aware and be knowledgeable enough about that thing, because we are talking here about intercultural communication. And that's the end of our Unit 3 Lesson 2 discussion. And thank you so much everyone for watching this pre-recorded video. And kung wala na sabtan, palihog ko, pakibalik ani nga pre-recorded video para masabtan. Thank you so much and see you next time. Keep safe.